What's up, guys? It's Johnny Candido of Candido Training HQ. We're keeping the videos rolling here. I hope you guys are appreciating the little bit of a quicker pace here, pumping out more content. I feel like I've been on like a third wave because I've actually been on YouTube for over 13 years now with this channel specifically. So anyways, before I begin, I'm going to make a series on the top 10 greatest of all time powerlifters coming soon. But before that, I wanted to just answer the question of who are the top 5 right now in the sport of powerlifting. We all know it's getting more and more competitive, and it is just insane the level of competition now. But before I go into that list, one quick point is that the Candido Forever program link is in the description. If you ever want to support the channel, there's nothing that you can do that matters more to me and that literally helps me focus on content more than joining in on the Candido Forever program. So link is in the description. Now, that being said, the 5th best lifter right now is the highest total of all time drug tested. That's how good powerlifting is right now. And it is Jesus Olivarez. So one big thing when it comes to Jesus in his training is that he has deadlifted 937 pounds recently. He even attempted a 942 pound deadlift. He kind of missed that, but then right after that still deadlifted over 900 pounds on like his 3rd or 4th max out attempt, which is, insane to be able to do it that often. So his strength on the deadlift is the best of any stiff bar drug tested deadlifter of all time. And not many people think about that because they just think about his squat first and foremost and kind of associate him naturally with Ray Williams, for example, being a 1,000-pound squatter. But the insane part also is, of course, his squat still is very, very strong. And I would say he probably had the most impressive squat set, arguably of all time this year. 842 pounds for a set of 7 reps, which is crazy to think, even as a percentage of a 1,000-pound squat. I mean, that is a near 85% for a set of 7. And to actually do that on the same day of squatting 1,000 with no spotters before that too, it is really almost unfathomable strength to be at this level, especially because he hasn't actually been gaining weight recently. He's been losing weight a little. Now, you may be asking me, but Johnny, why isn't he higher then? If he has, he beat Ray Williams total, he's been an all-time best lifter, he's been, IPF gold medalist for, I believe it's 4 straight years. I'll hash out the details on my all-time list. Now, the reason is because he hasn't PR'd in 2 years, and ultimately his body weight is the biggest issue. Unfortunately, in this sport, you are incentivized to just be straight up 430 pounds, 420 to 440 pounds, let's say, is the general range as a super heavy weightlifter, and you are just punished for being lighter than that. So because he has been losing weight and he's been getting well under that 400 pound, I don't know if he ever was 400 pounds, but now he's way under that. As you start to get in that 360 to 380, 390 range, it really becomes impossible for him to PR in the same way that he could had he just blown up to 425. I would say if he blew up to 425, I honestly think he would already have squatted 500 kilograms. But, I think he's making the right decision. We do go to the same gym, so I'll interview him at some point. I actually talked to him about that idea, and he's down to do it. So he's a great dude, and I wish him luck. He actually is going to compete fairly soon, so he could move up, I would say, all the way to the 2nd place spot if it goes perfectly. He definitely has the potential to do that. But I also could see if he has a bad meet, it could end up being to where he gets actually bumped off the list because there are just so many great lifters now. And speaking of which, our next lifter at the 4 spot is John Hack. Now, John Hack is, again, he will be someone who we mentioned on the greatest of all time list, but so far he's having a down year. So he dropped 45 points on his DOT score, and he also dropped 150 pounds on his total while gaining 20 pounds from last year. So overall, it's just, obviously that's not a result he's wanted. That is, a big hit. But even with all of that, he still has the highest DOTs of any lifter who competes without wraps. So that is an incredible thing to be able to lose literally 45 on your DOTs, on your coefficient, and still have that to be said. But the one issue with that is that he is being compared to both drug-tested lifters, and we'll see there is a lifter with wraps. So that's why he's not higher up. It's not just relative. Not just relative to his own training history. Obviously, it's relative to other lifters. But I'm also comparing it objectively that if he still was the best lifter this year, he would still be at that number 1 spot, even if he's not as good as he was last year. I'm not hurting him because it's relative to his rate of progress. Even in an absolute sense, I think his impressiveness right now, objectively, is not as impressive as all of these other three lifters, which again, I cannot emphasize enough how insane that is. That in my opinion, John Hack is the fourth best lifter right now, and he's arguably the greatest powerlifter of all time. Now, that being said, let's go right into the number 3 slot. Now we're entering the top 3. The third best powerlifter of 2025, drum roll please, is Joseph Borenstein. So Joseph Borenstein pulled off one of the craziest feats recently. He totaled 1984 total. Second was Atwood. Taylor Atwood totaled 1931. So he destroyed Taylor Atwood. Joseph Borenstein had a 480-pound bench and 831-pound deadlift, to give you an example of how strong he is at 183 pounds as a natural, and he's only 22 years old. I think that's one of the craziest things, to where if you had to imagine, 10 years ago, someone doing this, I mean, you just couldn't even imagine it, that a junior lifter is deadlifting 831 pounds and benching nearly 500 pounds as a natural 183-pound lifter. And I would say, I know YouTube loves to throw out fake natty accusations, and you can never know and all that. I would say his physique and the way his lifts progress, as far as he's a technical lifter, he has not one lift that's crazy strong. And I mean, if it is, it's the deadlift, but he has not one lift that stands out with other weaknesses. He's strong on everything. And because of that, I would say most people could see him and say it's more likely that he's natural than some other lifters, where they just have a gigantic, bench or gigantic squat, and they look like a meatball with giant traps. Borenstein does look like what you would expect a just extremely dedicated, unbelievably strong natural lifter to look like. Now, that being said, what's also crazy is that Russell Orhe is probably going to be 100 pounds under in total to Joseph Borenstein when it's all said and done. Maybe even more, maybe 120 pounds. And Russell Orhe, I would put on the top 10 of all time. And obviously his whole life, he's competed at 181/183. So, it really is just amazing that we live in an era where you can win IPF gold medals for half a decade, and then the moment you leave the weight class, you're dusted by 100 pounds. It's impossible to emphasize just how much almost nobody's legacy is safe. And I think that's the beauty of powerlifting today. And Joseph Borenstein's also already married, by the way, and he's just a very mature person from what I can tell. He's a coach, all that. So I think there's a lot of reason to believe that someone with their ducks in a row that early on and that focused could reach heights that maybe nobody can catch him on. He might end up being the best powerlifter of all time. At the number 2 spot, we have Austin Perkins. Now, Austin Perkins, his squat was on my top lifts of the previous year, and he has a 712-pound squat at 163 pounds body weight. Obviously, one of the strongest lifters ever, arguably the greatest lifter of all time as well. It is such a new sport that we have these lifters who are 25 and under, who are truly, arguably the best of all time, because you can't put someone like Taylor Atwood above Austin Perkins all time just based on past accolades, when Perkins can literally hit his squat max, comparing one at the same body weight, for 5 reps. You just can't do that. You can't make Bob Cousy ahead of LeBron. So we just have to admit the new generation is completely different. And I say that when Atwood still has the second best all-time 183-pound total right now. So it's not as if anyone's washed. It's just these lifters are elevating the standard so much. So one big fact is that Austin Perkins has the highest coefficient of any drug-tested lifter, flat out. So that's why he's number 2 all time, because that beats everybody out. But the reason why he's not number 1 for now is the fact that his total has not improved in 2 years. So this is the same story as Jesus Olivarez, is both of them have not PR'd in 2 years. And it's going to be a real big question to see. Is it possible that these guys just peak dramatically earlier than previous generations? Or is this just a temporary roadblock? Personally, for Austin Perkins, I do think it's temporary, because his training showed that he had so much more in the tank, and he had a higher ceiling than he displayed in Sheffield. And Sheffield had those weird rules that I mentioned in a previous video. Maybe I'll link it in the description, which I thought was cool, but that ultimately ended up screwing him. He was the best lifter, and he did not even come close to winning because of the rules. So what's really difficult is that his deadlift ultimately went down. So both his third attempt was missed, and even if he hit that, it still would have been lower than 2 years ago. So powerlifting is a tough sport where you can gain a lot in certain areas. Both his squat and bench have shown much higher potential than previously. But if you don't actually maximize on all three lifts, then all of a sudden, actually you haven't PR'd in 2 years and you've gone down, 19 pounds or whatever. So it's a tough sport for that reason. But again, we will see Austin Perkins on that all-time list because you could definitely argue these past 2 years, he has had the greatest 2-year run ever. Now, for your best powerlifter of 2025 to walk on the face of the planet, Colton Engelbrecht. I don't know how to say his name. Colton, I'll just call him. He has the all-time total record with reps. This is untested, but at 265 pounds, he has the heaviest raw total ever. And he demolished Dan Bell's record, but especially relative to age, he absolutely killed it. He's 10 years younger than Dan, like 100 pounds less, literally, and then totaled 40 pounds more. It's absolutely unbelievable. He's the first person to ever squat 1,000 pounds and deadlift 1,000 pounds in the same meet. And even after all that, he attempted a 1,100 deadlift. So had he hit that, it would just blow it out the water even more. It cannot be stated enough. And I do think sometimes the drug-free side of the sport, and I myself, I was hating on Eddie Hall just in my last video, and I do make the distinction big time. I think it really matters. I think we are two completely different communities in some respect. That being said, sometimes it's easy to get so dogmatic that you don't recognize greatness in the sport as a whole. So this is one of those where I have to say his accomplishment at 265 pounds to beat every single 350, 400 pounder, 330 pounder and demolish them is the most unbelievable thing that we've seen in powerlifting this year by far. Nothing comes close to it. So one thing that's also crazy too is because he's only 265 pounds, this is the first time I've ever seen it to where his dots is 28 points higher than the second best all time with reps, and that's Yuri Belkin. And then also having the all-time record total by far. We've never seen that a combination because even, for example, with Ray Williams and Jesus Olivarez, even in those years where they had the highest all-time total, because their body weight's so heavy and because it's so rare to have that heavy body weight, it's really hard to compare statistically, and they actually end up having a pretty low dots coefficient score, altogether. So they actually end up being, sometimes 10th or lower even. And then you kind of have to make the judgment of, okay, it's still impressive to lift the most weight of all time. Like that always has inherent value. So for Colton to do both at the same time and crush both at the same time is amazing. And the thing that's crazy is I remember the first time anybody raw deadlifted and squatted 900 pounds in the same meet. It actually took a while for that to happen. Mark Henry did it while not raw. So you could say he's kind of the early on pioneer in some sense. But then it took a while for only a handful of people and everybody ends up deadlifting right at around 903. So what's crazy is even Half-Thor competed in powerlifting. Some people forget that. And he squatted 1,000 pounds, but he only deadlifted 903 pounds, even though he's deadlifted 500 kilograms, for his all-time record deadlift flat out. So it shows just how much fatiguing it is to squat 1,000 pounds and then do your deadlift. So that's why it's unbelievable for Colton to be able to actually put it together in a meet to this level. And it shows that he has potential that is out of this world. I mean, if he did a deadlift only meet, I would not put it past him being able to actually pull something like 510 kilograms in a competition if he wanted to. But what I admire the most is that he keeps his focus on being strong overall. He actually mentioned earlier that on a different post, doing overhead barbell press, which you don't see very often from elite level lifters like this, he mentioned that he got into the sport doing CrossFit. And then he did a muscle up after. So I think that's a very interesting combination. However, I will say the one true weakness of him would be I think he might not be integrated enough into the community to want to maximize his potential specifically for powerlifting purposes.
I've never really looked up to anyone in the powerlifting industry. Sure, I've respected guys just because they were strong, but I've never idolized anyone. I've never looked up to anyone. I've always just wanted to be the best on my own, by myself.
We might end up seeing the greatest powerlifting talent of all time end up kind of drifting away from our hands before he reaches a true peak. And that would be unfortunate because right now he's 24, and I just hope that he competes until he's 26 to 28, and we truly get to see at least close to a genuine max strength performance from what humanity can do. If he leaves, we just don't find out what humanity could accomplish, with no limitations, with reps, with the juice, with all that it takes. But I fear that he may go to strongman or do something like that because he does seem to be ambitious, athletic, and kind of not in that bubble, which can be an advantage in some respects, definitely. But it also can be a disadvantage when it comes to longevity because ultimately you do have to care about the community and really be a part of it and really be into the sport as a fan in order for it to be worth it in the long run. So we will see. We will see. But without a doubt, what Colton has accomplished is better than anything any lifter has accomplished in our lifetime. I honestly believe that. I don't think any 1 year's performance has ever been as impressive as what Colton has done this year. That's it, guys. Make sure to like the video, support the channel. Join the Candida Forever program if you want to get stronger and join in on some form checks, Q&As, but a bunch of programs to come and some new programs to come as well. That's it, guys. Peace.